Welcome back to Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, a place where stories of service, sacrifice, and silent heroism find their voice, where we remember the legends who walked among us, wore the uniform, and carried them with the unseen weight of war long after the battles ended. Today, I am honored, truly honored, to introduce to you a man whose life reads like a chapter from a war novel, only every word is real. Christopher Warwick was not just a Navy corpsman, he was a lifeline, a healer in hell. A man who wore two uniforms, stood shoulder to shoulder with Marines in the jungles of Vietnam, and carried wounded brothers through gunfire with nothing more than grit, instinct, and duty. He was Doc, the name whispered in desperation and gratitude on the battlefield. From a small town in Illinois to the brutal terrain of Southeast Asia, from a childhood spent dreaming of Navy ships to saving lives under fire, Chris's journey is one of resilience, humor, and humility. He is a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart recipient, a veteran nurse, and the kind of man who didn't just serve his country, he lived for the people beside him. Today, we unravel his story, the one his parents never even knew while he was overseas, the one that shaped not only his future, but inspired generations to come. So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and listen closely, because this isn't just a story about war, it's about the heart behind the uniform.
Chris, I want to thank you and welcome you to the Barbed Wire Hotel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What branch of the military did you serve?
I was in the U.S. Navy.
I read you were in the Marines.
Well, I was a Navy Hospital Corpsman, and the Marines do not have their own medical department. So the medical department, the doctors, the nurses, and the corpsmen come from the Navy. So I was a hospital corpsman attached to a Marine Corps infantry unit. I often tell people I'm half sailor and half Marine, and some of them don't really kind of get that, but see, because I had to go to what they call field medical school to learn how to be a Marine. It's the only branch of the service that can wear two uniforms. And I mean, I can wear the Navy uniform, and I can wear the Marine Corps uniform.
I comprehend it a little bit because I've had Marines that have had to be surgery or be airlifted someplace, and they always went to the Navy.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
So, yeah, so I can connect those dots, yeah.
Their affectionate term for us, as their corpsman, is Doc.
I like that. That's good.
I've never run into a Marine that has not called me Doc, because in the field, that's who we are. I mean, and we do some pretty bizarre things that would make some people kind of go, ooh.
I've watched some movies. I get it.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Alton, Illinois.
Oh, what was your family dynamic?
Well, okay, there's my mother and my father and my sister, so there was four of us. My dad worked at Owens, Illinois. My mom was kind of a stay-at-home mom for a little while, but then as we began to grow up, my grandmother and grandfather owned a grocery store on Washington Avenue. The grocery store was on the corner of Washington Avenue and Boston. My grandmother and grandfather ran that store for 35, 36 years. And my mom helped out. She would go, when we got older, you probably don't remember banana crates. A long time ago, they used to deliver bananas in crates, wood crates.
I remember crates, yes.
And my grandmother had one behind the potato chip rack. And when we were kids, when Mom would take us to the store, she put us in the banana crate. We didn't have playpens, so she put us in the banana crate.
Oh, that's fun. Put some wheels on it and you have a wagon.
Absolutely. That's the only good thing. It didn't have wheels.
You guys would have been in real trouble then.
Yeah, we would have.
That's cool. Was your father in the service?
Yes. When my dad was 16 years old, he joined the Merchant Marines. You didn't have to be 18 or have anybody to sign for you to get into the Merchant Marines in the days, because they're a civilian organization that hires people to do work on ships. He grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and he went to the Merchant Marines in Baltimore and joined. Well, my dad was he was a young guy, 16, now stop and think. And he decided to get on a ship that did what was called the Murmansk Run. I don't know if you know anything about the Murmansk Run, but Murmansk was Russia. And we were running freighters to Russia with gasoline, ammunition, bombs for the Second World War. The northern part of the Atlantic was known as Wolfpack Alley. So when you went through the North Atlantic, there was tons and tons of U-boats. And he ran that for 2 years. He sailed a freighter back and forth to Murmansk, Russia, and back. Then he came back, and in May of 1944, he came out and he joined the Army. Well, my dad's a daredevil, and guess what? He joined the paratroopers. I often ask him, I said, Dad, what made you jump out of an airplane? He goes, you got to be something wrong with you to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft.
Yeah, I've done that.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I loved every minute of it.
Anyway, he jumped at D-Day with the 82nd Airborne. He jumped at Market Garden. He did 2 battle jumps and then when the war was over, he got what they called in cadre in Frankfurt, Germany. Cadre was occupational troops. He was in the occupation. So now you kind of see where I get my military back.
That is incredible. How did he feel about you going into the Navy?
Well, being my dad was ex-soldier, he knew basically let me give you a little background. Okay. When I was 10, we went to Annapolis, Maryland, and I got to see the Naval Academy. I don't know if you've ever been to the Naval Academy, and when the midshipmen march, it is something beyond belief. It just does something, you know. So we were there, and the midshipmen came out, and they started marching around the compound. And I said to him, boy, I'd like to be a sailor. He goes, yeah, he says, that's not a bad idea. So from that part, he knew that I was interested in being a sailor. Well, so as I went along from grade school into junior high and on into high school, I started building model ships, battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers. And my room was just all these ships that I had put together. And when I was 16, I went to my dad and I said, when I get old enough, I said, I'd like to join the Navy. He goes, okay, we'll see about getting you into Annapolis. And I go, no, I don't want to be an officer. I want to be, I want to wear the Cracker Jack uniform is what they call it. The blue one with the white stripes. Okay. He says, we can get you into the Naval Academy. I don't want to go. So when the year I turned 17, I was working in my uncle's gas station. It was on College Avenue and the Beltline, where the Beltline is. It was a Shell station. Okay. And right next to that was Chuckaburger. Okay, so I was working there in my senior year in high school, and I ambled down to the recruiter one day, and I went in and I started talking to him, and we sat down. He said, well, what would you like to do? Well, I thought, maybe being an aircraft mechanic got to be kind of fun. And he says to me, no, you don't want to be an aircraft mechanic. He says, that's dangerous work. He says, I got one for you. He says, we're looking for medical people. I said, oh. He says, yeah. He says, you'll really like that. He said, because you get 3 square meals a day, you're warm in the winter, you're cool in the summer, and it's just a good position. I said, well, that sounds pretty good. So I left there, and I went home, and I told my dad, and he says, well, think about that, and when you decide, let me know. So I sat on that for a couple of weeks, and I said, well, yeah. I said, Daddy, I think I'd like to go down there and join. He was fine. So my dad was fine with that because he knew that a young man's duty in the country at that time was to serve his country, whether it be for 2 years, 4 years, or 30 years, whatever. So we went down there. He talked to the recruiter. He listened to him say the same thing. He said, yeah, that might not be too bad. So I was 17, so I couldn't sign up, but he did sign the papers. My mother was livid. Oh, my God. And my draft number was 18.
You're kidding.
No.
Oh, my gosh.
So if I hadn't enlisted,
they would have had you anyway.
Drafted anyway.
Yeah. Wow. And it's better to enlist than to draft.
Well, you get to choose.
Yeah.
See, that's part of that story too, because once I enlisted, you have to go over and get a physical and get, because they don't take you if you're not physically well to go. So they're called MEPSs now, but they were AV stations in those days in St. Louis. And the recruiter takes you over there and they run you, they do it physical exam, the blood test, whole 9 yards. They just do everything, and they're telling you all about this stuff the entire time. Well, if you pass that part, the recruiter brings you back. You go back to the recruiting station, and he gives you a date that you're going to be taken over so that you can go on the boot camp. Well, their numbers were pretty high in that time in August. He said, we're just going to have to let you know when there's an opening so you can come. I probably wasn't home a week and a half, and the phone rang, and it was him. He says, we can get you in tomorrow. I said, excuse me? He goes, yeah, if you could be down here at 6 o'clock in the morning, we can get you in. That was in August of 1970. So I went to my dad, and I said, hey, I can go to boot camp starting tomorrow. He goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, why don't I go? He said, what time you got to go? I said, well, I got to be down on Broadway in front of the recruiting station at 6 o'clock. He said, don't worry, I'll take you. Next morning at 6 o'clock, we climbed in the car. He took me down there. And the recruiter he had a little bus, and about 9 guys got on that little bus, and he took us over to St. Louis. And they have to run you through another set of physicals, because if it's not that same period of time, like a week, you have to have another physical to make sure you pass. Of course, that happened. All that was taken care of. Then they swear you in. And they take you in this big room, and the Marines are over there, the Air Force is over there, and the Army's over there, and the Navy's over there, and the draftees are in the middle. And a sergeant comes out, and he stands up in front of them guys, and he tells them to stand at attention, and they are, and he walks up to them, and he goes, you, you're in the Navy. You, you're in the Army. You, you're in the Marine Corps. You, you're in the Air Force. And that's how draftees got to where they're going. That was what I remember.
Yeah.
That's why I enlisted. I wanted to decide what I was going to do. And then from there, boot camp at Great Lakes, Illinois. It's called Great Lakes Naval Training Center, RTC, Recruit Training Center. It's right on Lake Michigan. Actually, we took a train from St. Louis to Chicago, and then we got out of the train station in Chicago, and we had to take a BL, Chicago Northwestern elevated train, from Chicago to just outside Great Lakes, because the train don't go to, right to Great Lakes. So you had to get out and you had to walk about, 6 or 7 blocks till you got to Recruit Training Center. At 17. Yeah. The thing I remember most, initially, the first thing, was out, and it had a big gate that said, and of course, that was in the era of Admiral Elmo Zumwalt. And the big sign on the front of the place said, welcome to the new Navy. And, well, hey, we didn't know what that was. But there was 2 young recruits. They were in their 5th week, what we called service week. They were doing their service week duty. And I remember the one looked at us and he goes, and there was 6 of us. Because I picked up 2 other guys at AFE station, and then along the way in a train, we picked up other guys. So there was 6 of us. And the guy looks at us and goes, guys, you're in a world of shit. Brother, we got inside that gate and we had no idea. Believe me, it's amazing how quickly you adapt to things. First thing I remember, they kept us up to like 2 o'clock in the morning doing processing stuff, getting us our service numbers and getting stuff ready for our dog tags and everything. And it was about 2:30, I guess, in the morning, and they rushed us off to this barracks so we could lay down. We probably weren't in bed 2 hours. And this guy comes in with a trash can and a Coke bottle and runs it around the inside of the trash can. And he says, okay, everybody up, just cycle. That's when you realize you're in the military. So then they'd form us up, and we'd march over to the mess hall, and we'd stand in line for an hour. Here's something that's really good to know. This is normal mantrage for the military. Hurry up and wait.
Oh, really? I've not heard that, but yeah.
Hurry up and wait.
Jiminy Christmas.
Can't tell you the number of times we heard that.
That's incredible. But they're getting you in line, and it's where they start to form you into a soldier.
That's exactly right. Yes. And the very first part is that standing in line for an hour. That's discipline. That's how you learn discipline.
I couldn't do that today.
I would. They'd have to carry me out there stretch.
Give me 5 minutes, I might be able to do that. Oh my gosh. Well, now, how long did you serve?
I served for 4 years active duty, and then I spent 2 years in the reserves.
Did you?
And that was a choice because I didn't have to.
Right.
I was in that period of time where they were junctioning over from active duty and putting you in active reserve units. I was in what they call the ready reserve. When I was released from the Navy, I was put in a ready reserve, which means I wasn't required by the government to drill every weekend and then do 2 weeks in the summer.
Oh.
They gave me my separation papers and I went home. Well, the thing is when I went home, I had already set up to go start college at Lewis and Clark. And once I started, I thought, they pay you for being in the reserves just like they do in regular active duty. So I could make some money if I got into reserves. So I sought out a recruiter. And him and I, you remember where Sebo's Pizza used to be?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That became a donut shop.
Okay.
And I met him there, and we talked about, and he says, just let me see what I can do. So he got a hold of me a few days later, and he says, and we got back together, and he says, this is what I can do. But I had to go back over and do another physical exam because they weren't going to. But basically, I was still could be considered on ready reserve units. And that's what we did. I signed a paper, and I joined the reserves. And my drilling unit was over by Lambert Airport, over by the airport. It was NRMC, Navy Regional Medical Center, 2812. That was our designation. And our active duty spot to go to in the event we were called up for active duty was the United States Naval Hospital at Millington, Tennessee. And that's where I did my 2 weeks reserve ship, was at Millington. And I mean, for 2 days to drill on a Saturday and a Sunday, to go over to St. Louis and basically mess around here and do a few things there, and you do exams on Marines because they had a Marine Corps unit over there. I got paid. And of course, I had the GI Bill to go to college on, so it didn't cost me anything. But the GI Bill covered all my entrance into college. And then at that time, and there still may be, it's called the Illinois Military Scholarship. And what it did, it paid for my books and my lab fees. So I didn't have to do that. So basically, I got my education. I got a 2.5-year education for 4 years of active duty in the Navy, which I thought was a pretty good,
That is a good deal. Now, what did you get your degree in?
Nursing. I was associate's degree in applied sciences, and my major was in nursing.
Does that make you an LPN or an RN? Or
I was an RN. I was a student nurse until I took my boards.
Yeah.
And when I took my boards, then when I passed them, that made me an RN.
That was almost a female-dominated industry back in the day.
Oh, yes, it was. When there was 4 guys in my nursing class, and there was 52 of us. That kind of tells you how, where. But, it was growing, I mean, I can remember back when I was young, there used to be a guy that came in my grandma's store. He was a nurse, RN. And he was only the first one in his graduating class, and that was in 1963.
It's really grown as an industry, I'll tell you, especially with the
guys. And it's really accepted men, too. I mean, it's because it's a good profession. It really is.
Men can lift other men, whereas there's some men that women would have a hard time lifting.
Absolutely.
Going back to your time in the service, after boot camp, what did you do?
I went to Hospital Corps School at Balboa Naval Hospital in San Diego, California. That's where I learned to be a hospital corpsman.
And how did they teach you?
Just like they do in school classes. We had classes. We had pharmacology. We had first aid. We had anatomy and physiology. I mean, just like if you were going to a regular college. Yeah. The only thing is we weren't given a degree. I was given a certificate, but I wasn't given a degree.
How long did you go to that?
That was 10 weeks.
10 weeks? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So
then when I graduated from there, they sent me to field medical school at Camp Pendleton. Yeah. Wow. And that was 9 weeks.
You learned like more intricacies on how to fix people in the field, how to fix guys?
Yeah. You also learned how to navigate your way around by compass. You learned how to live off the land. I'll give you a good instance. 10 o'clock one night, they took us. There was 36 of us because it was a platoon. And I mean, we're talking about all corpsmen. We're not talking about anybody else. And they dropped us off in this open area, and they said, okay, you got 24 hours to get back to this position. And they give you a map, and they show you what position it is. And you've got to figure out how to get back. In the dark.
Oh, my gosh.
You know something? In my platoon, I was the only one who could read a compass.
Really?
You know why?
Boy Scouts?
Boy Scouts. I couldn't believe nobody else had ever been in the Boy Scouts. I said, what happened to you guys?
Yeah,
Anyway,
Boy Scouts was really big back in the day.
Yeah, and it was just, but a lot of those were big city kids, Chicago, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they just had never did that.
Wow.
But yeah, so.
Jiminy.
I
mean, I would follow the moon, but yeah.
And, I mean, that's another good way to do it. I mean, and you learn all those things to do that. Same way with the sun. When you're out during the day, you can figure out where you are by looking at where the sun's at. Yeah. You know where north, south, east, and west is, just by the position of the sun.
Well, that's how they did it before clocks, before time,
Absolutely.
Before watches. During your training in San Diego or at Camp Pendleton, did anything you learn, like, totally shock you, surprise you? It's like, they want me to do what?
I think the most, you stop thinking about, as a young high school kid and just getting it. I think the most shocking was how to do a tracheostomy. We literally learned that. I mean, we didn't do that. They didn't practice on each other. And we didn't have dummies in those days. So the instructor basically, he would lay one of us on the table and he'd say, this is what you do. You identify this. And that was probably the most shocking,
Well, that's kind of hard to not actually do it. And then what happens if you fail? It's like.
Well, and that was one thing they the instructors kind of impressed upon us. You're not going to save everybody. Do what you're trained and leave the rest to God. You're not going to save everybody. And you kind of come to terms with that and realize it takes a little bit. We had a special day that we called Mass Casualty Day. And what we do is they take a certain amount of guys and make them casualties. And then you would have to go out to where they are and treat them in the field. And then they would bring them back on stretchers and put them in front of the instructor, and he would look to see what you did. And, of course, if you didn't do something right, he would point it out. Or if the patient died as they were bringing him in, the instructor's favorite words were, gentlemen, we have a death here. I want you to be able to deal with certain things. And, you can have all the training in the world, but until it happens in your face, it's tough.
After you went to Camp Pendleton, then where did they send you?
Guess where?
Not Vietnam.
Vietnam. Republic of. If you looked on the globe years ago, when you looked it up, that's what it said. Vietnam, Republic of. There were 16 of us. They flew us from San Diego, California, straight to Da Nang, Vietnam. And once we got into Da Nang, that's when they divvied us up and told us where we were supposed to go. I got lucky. I got to go to one of the best Marine Corps units in Vietnam, the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. And you know what they were called? The Walking Dead. Because they had the most casualties of any Marine Corps unit in Vietnam.
It's like the Bloody 100th in World War II.
There you go. That's exactly right. They don't tell you that till you get there. I used to tell a lot of people, but I got a more affinity for the Marine Corps because I spent more time with them. I remember how they treated me. Sometimes sailors can get pretty ugly. They call you weird names. I won't mention any, but they call you weird names. Marine Corps, not so much, because they know who you are. Without you out there, they have a good chance of surviving something. No, that ain't going to happen.
Okay, so this was the end of 1970. Right?
Actually, I didn't get in the country until 1971. Oh. So the war was winding down, but there were still troops over there. I mean, there was troops over in Vietnam until 1975. I don't know if you remember when Nixon said that we were going to start turning over the war to the Vietnamese, to the South Vietnam. And that's what was going on in those periods of time. There was units that were leaving Vietnam, and then there were units that were still there that were assisting because we was turning over that part of the war to them. That wasn't the best thing to have happened. I mean, don't get me wrong. We had some wonderful, great South Vietnamese units. The South Vietnamese Marines were beyond belief. Their special forces were beyond belief. But a regular Vietnamese soldier wasn't very brave. And it's sad because we were hoping as we began to turn that over that they'd be able to maintain the country. We left a lot of good Vietnamese soldiers over there when we pulled out.
What were your tasks like over there?
Okay, I was attached to a Marine Corps platoon, so I did everyday wellness. You know, I made sure all the guys' feet were okay because blisters and all kind of, you know, trench foot and stuff like that. It could really cause a problem. We held sick call for guys that were sick, you know. And we didn't have a doctor with us, so we were in communication with the battalion aid station. And if a guy had an infection or something, we could always get the doctor to order medication for him. We had a first-class petty officer that could do anything a doctor could do. I mean, he'd been there 3 times. So, I mean, he was really well versed. And a lot of times he didn't even bother to call the doctor. He just said, give him some penicillin, give him some tetracycline. He was just good at what he did. And we also took care of Vietnamese people. A lot of people don't know that. That we would go into villages that the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese would have ravaged. And we treated them too. There's a picture over here on the wall. And I didn't realize it, but it was in Life magazine. But we had been on a search and destroy mission, and we ran into a tunnel, and one of the guys went in and ran into a North Vietnamese Viet Cong soldier in the tunnel and shot him in the face. Hit him right here in the cheek. And drug him out and sat him up beside it. And if you can see, my back is to the camera, but I'm treating him. We're lifesavers, not life takers. Because I have a lot of people, you fought in Vietnam. No, didn't do that. That wasn't my job. My job was to save lives.
When they think about war or Vietnam, World War II, they don't think about the foot issues and blisters, and they got sick. It has never crossed my mind that a single soldier ever got sick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we treated pneumonia. We treated infections. Guys would get cut and get infected. There was always the ever-present punji sticks that were these big sticks that were dipped in human excrement, and if you stepped on it, it punched through your boot. You know, and then you get your foot off that well. I mean, it causes a raging infection if you don't treat it. You know, a shrapnel, God almighty, with bombs and mortar shells would be going on. Guys would be catching pieces of shrapnel, and you got to treat all of them. I don't often say this because I'm a pretty modest guy, and, you know, I always said I just did what I was trained. But we were supporting a South Vietnamese unit one day that was on a search and destroy mission. And it was going to be our platoon and their platoon. And we had 2 squads down on the ground. And we were moving forward to this tree line when we were about 25 yards from the tree line, and the small arms fires opens up. Well, we had 2 guys out on the perimeter as scouts, and both of them got hit. I could see from where I was, I could see that the South Vietnamese soldiers were taking fire too. But I immediately dropped to the ground and crawled out to those guys to see how they were. But when I got to the guy on the left-hand side of the flank, when I rolled him over, his face was gone. So I knew he was dead. So there wasn't anything I could do to him. But I could see the other guy over there. He was about, 30 yards from me. And we're tall grass now. You understand? We're in elephant grass. And I could see him moving around. So I started crawling over there. When I crawled to him, I got, 7, 8 feet from him. I could see him waving his hand at me. I was like, wait. And he kept waving his hand, and I just kept crawling towards him. And I get right next to him. He said, what the hell are you doing? I go, yeah, man, I'll come over here and see how you're doing. He said, can't you see me waving you off? I'm not looking at it. So he had taken a bullet between his flak jacket and his chest. Thank God it went through and it didn't really do anything real bad. But so I bandaged him up, and I crawled behind him, and I grabbed him by the feet, and I started crawling back to where our lines was at. And to this day, I still don't know how it happened. But, you know, when you crawl, and sometimes you stick your feet up in the air to get some traction. I stick my feet up in the air, and I felt this sting in my foot. And I didn't think anything about it, so I crawled all the way back to the lines. That firefight lasted 16 minutes, and that was it, about 15 minutes. And it was over. Well, they called the choppers back in to get us. And I'm walking over to the chopper with this guy, and I'm limping. And the guy in the next platoon says, why are you limping? I said, I don't know. I said, I stepped on a thorn or something. He said, so we flew back to the compound, and I'm sitting in the compound with my leg propped up on an ammo crate. And this friend of mine that was in the other platoon comes over and says, let me look at your foot. So I took my boot and sock off, and there was a bullet hole I think it was a bullet hole. It might have been a piece of shrapnel, I'm not sure, of the right hand side of my foot.
No.
Yeah. So I took a piece of shrapnel on the right side of the foot. And he dug it out for me. He wanted me to go back to Battalion A station. I refused to do that. So he said, well, we'll treat it, So we meandered over to our aid station, and he packed it, and he got me antibiotics. So that.
You just act so nonchalant. I mean, like, I mean, I'd be like, oh my God.
Well, you learn how to keep your cool in the mid of chaos. And I can tell you I can't speak for a lot of other guys, but I can tell you there would be hours of boredom for 30 minutes of chaos.
And when you were at your camp, was it like a MASH unit?
Similar, but we didn't have any hospital. Those were all Marine Corps infantry soldiers. So we were all scattered on our compound. And you may have heard the term bunkers or hooch. All of us lived in hooches. They were bunkers dug into the side of the ground with sandbags on top. And that's how you lived. You lived underground. Because artillery shells, mortar shells, gunfire. And that's how we lived. We were part of a supporting force that had 4 compounds out. And each was probably about a mile or a kilometer from each other. So we were scattered out pretty good. And you lived like a rat. As part of that unit, corpsmen rotated duties to do duty during the day and at night. That was your job. And I don't know, I'm just one of those kind of guys. So I would go back to the mess bunker and I would get a couple canteens full of coffee with a couple of cups. And I would climb into the trench and I'd walk down the trench and I would go to the gun emplacements where the guys were at and we'd have coffee and cigarettes. And I'd get done with one and I'd take the canteens and I'd take the coffee and I'd go to the next one. The other guys didn't do that, So on the nights I wasn't around, they were always asking, where's Doc Warwick? Where's Doc Warwick? He's got the coffee. Because I know them guys were out there by themselves and I just wanted to make sure they were okay. And and then bringing a cup of coffee was just, that's what you do. You share that, and you share those experiences. And that becomes a camaraderie.
Well, you're protecting each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've often said that to Karen. I said, there's times, I've stood in the trenches with guys beside me, and that's your trench buddy. And in the face of a gunfight, it's pretty scary.
Is there something that's more memorable about your time over there versus another time?
The first time I ever did a trait, that was probably the most serious. We were on a trail. We walked into an ambush, and one guy got hit. He got hit right here in the side of the throat. And, of course, you crawl up on somebody like they have no idea what to expect. And you look down and you see half this piece of his throat going. And you say to yourself, oh, my God, what am I going to do? And then your training kicks in. Okay, this guy's going to suffocate to death if I don't do anything. So you pull out out of your Unit 1 box or a bag, you pull out your scalpel. And we used to collect big pen barrels, clear barrels. And you can make a little slice and stab that barrel down in there to get the guy to breathe, to give him air. And then you patch up what you can, and you try to get a medevac in there to get him out of there. And that wasn't always feasible. Sometimes you had to haul him a little while before the choppers could land, but that's what you do. Now, the funny one is, we're in the compound one afternoon, about 3:30, and we usually ate chow about 5. And we were all sitting around talking. We were all sitting around just joking and laughing. And we have these things called 4-holers. And what they are, they're outdoor latrines. And then underneath the floor of them are these 55-gallon drums cut to a quarter height with diesel fuel in them, so that you can burn that human waste.
Yeah.
So we're over, and we were probably 30 yards from where the 4-holer was. And one of the guys is walking over there, and he's got a cigarette in his mouth, and he goes in and he's smoking. Well, one thing a lot of guys do is they take that cigarette when they're done and they throw it down between their legs into the toilet. And he pulls that cigarette out and he throws it between his legs. And there was this huge kaboom! And we thought that it got hit by a mortar shell.
Oh my gosh.
And we ran over there, and there's this 6-foot diameter hole, 4 foot deep, and no sign of him or anything. And way kind of off in the distance, you could hear, help, help. And we were looking, and one of the guys spotted him. He was caught in the fork of the tree. He'd been blown off. Lucky soul. He You know, I mean, he wasn't burned severely, but he had first and second degree burns on his backside. And fortunately enough, it got him home. That was his free ticket home. There are things that kind of break up that seriousness and that you know, life-changing things. Now, it was 2 years after that I got called by my commanding officer one day into the office, and I thought I was in a boatload of trouble. I mean, seriously. When you get called in, your commanding officer, it's going, oh, well, this is break time or something. And so I went and I reported to him. I said, yes, sir. He says, I need you at the auditorium tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I thought, auditorium at 10 o'clock. No excuses. Wear your undressed whites. Yes, sir. Or wear your tropical whites. Yes, sir. So next morning when I get all ready and get dressed up, and I go over and I get into the auditorium and I sit down in a chair, and all these people are in this building sitting in chairs. I mean, we're talking about officers, enlisted men, all these people. And there's a podium up there, and there's a couple of officers standing on the stage at the podium. And my commanding officer steps up to the podium, and he goes, I'd like to call Petty Officer Christopher Warwick to the podium. I thought, oh, hell, they're going to draw and quarter me in front of him. So I got up there, and I stood in front of him at attention, and he takes out this letter, and he reads this letter of commendation from my commanding officer in Vietnam that time, awarding me a Bronze Star for the duty I did that day, crawling out there in the middle of this gunfight and pulling that Marine to safety. I mean, you know, and people say, people go out there and win. No, you don't win anything. You know, you go out there and you do what you're trained to do. I didn't find it out. I didn't think of anything fancy, spectacular. I didn't think I was a Superman. I was just going out there to save a man's life.
But here's the kicker. The kicker is that you risked your life to save his.
Yeah, that's what my commanding officer said. Don't forget, you put your life in harm's way.
Flying into Vietnam, you're putting yourself in harm's way. And the rest of the time, 100%, you don't know what the enemy is going to plan for you.
Exactly right. Oh, by the way, I got a Purple Heart for the shot in the foot, too.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, but you know, and I mean, a Purple Heart's a great thing, don't get me wrong. But you could cut yourself in a combat zone and get a Purple Heart. So I was in country about 4 months, and I was doing my little duty thing. I was walking around the perimeter. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and another unit's lieutenant was standing in the middle of the compound, and him and I were talking. And just out of the blue, this huge explosion goes off. And I thought he stepped on a mine. The concussive blast was so bad, I was standing on top of a trench line, and it blew me down into the trench. I mean, so far that I fell into the trench. It knocked me out for, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half or two. Because I can remember this friend of mine that was in one of the other platoons slapping me on the cheek, going, wake up, are you okay? And I kind of opened my eyes, and I go, what happened? He goes, I don't know. I think the lieutenant stepped on a mine. So we kind of peered up over the top of the trench line, and there was just this big hole. So we crawled out of there, and we walked over there, and finally everybody, and all was basically left in the crater was his boots. And what they did, they had dropped a mortar shell in on us, and he was right where the mortar shell hit. And of course, I didn't realize it because, you know, your adrenaline is really going. And we went back to the battalion aid station, and I was sitting on a chair, and all of a sudden I started feeling this steamy stuff, you know. And so they turned the lantern up, and I started looking, and here are these little pieces of shrapnel. I mean, that mortar shell had screwed shrapnel. They dug out 23 pieces that night. And I'm still, to this day, feeling little pieces of shrapnel coming to the surface of the sea.
Was there something that was done with phosphorus from North Vietnam?
Well, those are called Willie Peter rounds, white phosphorus rounds. And you can shoot them, or they're grenades. And white phosphorus is horrible because you can't put it out.
So you have to cut it out?
Yeah, basically. Thank God I have never been in a situation where I had to do that. We never got hit with white phosphorus.
I just saw that the other day, and
they used it a lot in the Second World War. The artillery units fired a lot of white phosphorus shells, Willie Peter shells at the enemy to catch things on fire and stuff like that. But fortunately enough, where I was, we never got no Willie Peter ever hit us. We didn't carry. I don't think any of the guys in any of our units carried white phosphorus grenades.
But didn't North Vietnam have it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What did you guys do in your free time?
Played cards, drank beer, smoked, cussed, talked about women. And that's the kind of way we pass time, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, you know, rations, sea rations is what we had, you know, because that's our canned food. Your lifeline is this little piece of metal that's got a hook on it, and it's a can opener. The Army, some of them call it a P-38, some of them call it a John Wayne. But there's two things that are your lifeline, is your John Wayne and your spoon.
Did you carry those around your neck with your tag?
Actually, I had a pocket that was specifically designed to carry my spoon. My P-38 was on a chain that was looped around my belt loop.
What brought you back to the United States?
Well, my tour was done. I still had 2 years of an enlistment to do, because I got sent over there early in my enlistment. So they sent me, when I came back, to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. That's where the 2nd Marine Division is. I got stationed with 1st Battalion, 6th Marines to start with. And then 3 months later, I got transferred from there to the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. And we worked in Battalion 8 stations on, you know, in the camp. We held sick call, and we treated colds, and, you know.
Once you left Camp Lejeune, where did you go?
Well, that was the end of my 4-year enlistment. I went back home, and that's when I started college at Lewis and Clark to go to nursing school. And I did a year and a half of my prerequisites to get all those out of the way, so that when I got into nursing school, all I had to do was nursing classes. So I did. That was good, because then I didn't have to focus on anatomy, physiology, and chemistry, and all that business. And I got into the nursing school, and I started nursing school. Remember Linda Campbell?
Yes.
She was the maternal child nursing instructor out there.
Was she really?
And, yeah.
Oh.
When I was going to nursing, she was in nursing school. One of the younger instructors come in, and she had a box full of oranges on this arm and a box full of syringes under her arm. And she says, "Today we're going to learn how to do injections." I stood up and said, "You kidding me?" She goes, "No, we're going to learn to do how injections." I said, "Lady, I tell you what, when you can show me how to do an injection or an IV in the middle of a mortar attack at 2 a.m. by flashlight in mud up to your eyeballs."
Oh, my goodness.
She looked at me, she said, "What?" I said, "Lady, I spent a year in Vietnam. I put in more needles than you can count. And they ain't been in ideal situations." She looked at me, she said, "Sit down."
Wow.
That's like he was trying to teach me to take a blood pressure. Can you be serious?
Oh, my gosh. Well, you know, Debbie Bailey, she's a nurse.
Yeah, I do.
She was a really good nurse. Oh, I mean, she's retired now, but I think she was over in St. Louis at Barnes.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
You know Terry Walkington?
Yes. Oh, Terry.
You know, she's a nurse,
great
and she
nurse.
used to be the director of a program.
When you came back, how was your mom and dad?
But my mother and father did not know I went to Vietnam. I didn't tell them. Ever.
Even after you came back, you didn't say you went?
You never told them about the Bronze Star.
They didn't know I went.
Oh, my
But
God.
that's
Didn't
another
you
story.
write them?
Sure. But actually, I wrote them, but through my sister.
Oh, my God. Your sister-in-law,
I would write letters to my sister, and she would mail them to my mom and dad, so that it was a United States postmark and not a APO, Army Post Office.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I know it's stupid.
Well, no, it's not necessarily stupid. It's protective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, but how do you explain when they're carrying you off the plane in a pine box? But I didn't think of that. Young guy, you know. Didn't think of it.
Well, you're young.
Yeah. Okay, now, this is, Karen just said about the story. I went over there in 1971. I didn't come back until 1972. And the Christmas of 1971 came and went. I was there. After Christmas was over, my mom wanted the tree taken down, and my dad said, no, the tree's not coming down until Chris can come back for Christmas. So he left the tree up, and he left all the packages underneath it. And my sister Debbie would have friends come over, and they'd go downstairs, and they'd see the tree with the packages under it. And they'd say, well, Deb, you guys still have a Christmas tree up, and it's got packages under it. She goes, yeah, I know. She goes, that's my dad's idea. She goes, he wants it to stay up till Chris can come home and have Christmas. So in December of 72, I finally got to go home for Christmas.
What'd you get as a gift?
Oh, I got clothes and socks and underwear. just regular stuff. You know how parents buy that stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just...
I think my mom bought me a Robin's Egg blue leisure suit. You remember those?
I remember those. Yes.
Polyester.
Yeah, it was
Polyester. They thought they were so cool. What, could you wind them up into a jar and they'd come out and you didn't have to iron them?
Iron them, yeah. And I had the white belt and the white shoes. I mean, you know, all decked out.
You were styling.
Oh, yeah. You know, that's the 70s.
I'm sorry, I just can't get over this fact that your parents didn't know you were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And everything you did over there.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking, you know, now, I mean, we're talking years ago. My parents have been dead for quite some time. I think back now, I think my dad, and how he would have reacted if he knew. He would probably have been a little bit angry to begin with, but then he would have been
He would have understood. Yeah, very proud. Well, especially the Bronze Star.
Yeah, I know. It was stupid, but young kid don't.
Oh, no.
Like you said, you're thinking about keeping them from, you know, being... Because, I mean, what was going on every night on TV, the war, you know, and that would have drove them nuts.
But your sister knew, so she somehow prepared herself should you have gotten hurt really bad.
Yeah, Deb was great. You know, I mean, her and I were like this, Diana. And I don't think you could find two closer siblings.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, she'd cover me, I'd cover for her, so it really worked out.
Now, did your service inspire anyone else?
No.
Your kids?
No.
Did any of them go on to become nurses?
I got a granddaughter now that's in nursing school,
Really?
and I think she's really going to be a good nurse.
Oh, that's
really
good.
She keeps talking pediatric ICU. Oh, and maternity, yeah. I said, because last time I was talking to her, I said, hey, let's kind of back up a little bit. Let's get into just a regular medical or surgical ward and see how that is, so you get used to that. You know, because that's a real good indoctrination into nursing, because you deal with everything. And then kind of work your way up into NICU or maternity. The reason she likes being a maternity nurse, she's got 3 children. And she would just love to take care of babies.
Yeah.
Because she has so much respect for the nurses who took care of her.
I can't handle the bad news.
That's the toughest part.
I mean, you have to put up a shield. But like you, over in Vietnam, they taught you how to put that shield up and to act and react and just do it.
And you know, that's why nursing school, or even being a nurse, wasn't such a real traumatic deal for me, because I had that background. As we used to say, never let them see you sweat. You know, you just be confident, do your job, get the job done. When it's all said and done, then you can go in the living room and break down. Yeah. I've worked with a lot of nurses. I mean, we were elbow to elbow. We'd be in deep shit, excuse my French, you know, saving a person's life and everything. And we'd all get our jobs done, and they'd make it. We'd ship them off to ICU, and we'd all go our separate ways. And you wouldn't see us for a little while because we were all dealing with it in our own fashion. And I could remember going by a utility room a couple of times and hearing a couple of them in there sobbing and crying. But that's what you do, you know, that's how you and then you go on to the next time.
You were gone for a year, and
yeah.
You're just totally into what you're doing. Then you come back to the United States, and even though you're still in the service, you're back on your home soil. Did you feel any changes in the United States?
Let's go back and think about the 60s and 70s and the reaction of what was going on at the Vietnam War was going on, even as it was winding down. When I came back, I flew into the airport in San Diego. Of course, you have to change planes to get a plane to go to the East Coast. And I mean, I can remember, and I had my uniform on, and I was actually coming up the long way. and these people over on the side jeering and hollering and calling you all kind of names and everything, you know. And you just kind of ignore that because I knew it was going on because it had been going on previously. So I just went and found whatever gate I needed, and then I went and got on the plane and then went to the East Coast. A lot of tension in those days, a lot of tension. The only place that felt no tension was on base because everybody, not all of them had gone, but they were all military people. So they knew, that was not appropriate. That's the only time I felt anything like that.
If you had it to do over again, would you do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd gear up tomorrow.
I probably would stay in the military.
I would gear up tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of people go, really? I go, yeah. You have no idea when you get that done, that accomplishment, you feel proud of yourself. And I'm telling you, Diana, I can stand at a ball game and listen to the Star Spangled Banner and still get chills on my spine.
And if there's a flyover, that's even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially if they do a missing man, where they got the 5 planes in the one trail. It's pretty emotional.
After you graduated from Lewis and Clark, where did you go to work?
The year before I graduated, I was working at Christian Northeast as their evening orderly on orthopedics. I helped set up a lot of the traction. I transport people back and forth from X-ray and stuff like that. I was also the morgue attendant, which meant if there was a dead body in the morgue and the undertakers come to get it, I went down and released the body. That was kind of neat because they were funeral directors. They were really the undertakers. You would help them get the body on their stretcher and into their car, and they would tip you. I mean, most of them gave me $5. That was a good deal, really. So they'd call me and say, well, there's a guy down there tomorrow wants to get a body. Okay, here's $5. I'll be able to buy lunch. So I did that for a year. And then when I graduated from nursing school, that very same floor hired me as a nurse. And I worked on that floor for 3 years as an orthopedic nurse. Then I left Christian Northeast and went to work for St. Joe's.
I always liked St. Joe's. I always liked it. That's where I had my son. I chose them over Memorial.
I worked there too, by the way.
Oh, did you?
But I was born at St. Joe's, and I went to St. Joe's in '79, and I worked from '79 to '80 at St. Joe's, and then I went to St. Elizabeth's in Granite City on IV team. Worked there for a year in Granite City, and they were starting one at the University Hospital in Columbia, and their director of pharmacy came headhunting, and me and 2 other people took a job working for him over in Columbia, so I was there for a year. I traveled for 4 years as a dialysis. That was really fun. I often tell people, we're one great, big, wonderful country, but we don't all think the same. Yes. For anybody that's been a nurse for a while and they're kind of clowning around wondering what to do, I suggest getting in as a traveler.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say or that I should have asked you?
I was an RN for 36 years. I packed that all in 2014. I figured I'd give that profession as much as I could give, and I was done giving. Leave that to the young ones. I walked out of the building one day at the end of my time and never looked back. And I sure as hell haven't missed it. I mean, I missed the patients, taking care of patients, but all the politics and all the hubbub, I don't miss any of that.
From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you so much for talking to me.
Hey,
Really.
Thank you for even thinking of me.
If you are a veteran, or if you know someone who is, I urge you to share your story. Whether you fought in battle or worked behind the scenes, your experience matters. It's not just history, it's our history. It's a history we cannot afford to lose. At Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we are committed to preserving these stories, but we need your help. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends and family, and most importantly, if you have a story to tell, reach out to us on social media or email. Both are listed in our description. Every veteran story deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored. So join us in this journey. Together, we can ensure that the legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel live on. This is Diana Mall Halstead, Big Creeky's daughter, signing off. Thank you for listening, and to all veterans, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service and your sacrifice. If you would like to purchase a copy of my dad's memoir, Writings from the Barbed Wire Hotel, click the link in the description. In the back of almost 800 pages is an index of all the sources I used to research my dad's military career and time as a prisoner of war. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Let's spread the word and keep these stories alive. And remember, every story matters, especially yours. Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel was written by and produced by Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriege's daughter. Until next time, this is Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Thanks for listening.